Chapter 9. Cam. After witnessing the Black Hawk being knocked from the sky, Cam began to form a very different picture in his mind's eye of what the future held for him and his family. He and Jen finished the coffee and returned to the kitchen. He stood, staring out through the massive windows while his wife rummaged through the kitchen seeking meal options for the children they both knew would be awake soon. Over the next 4 days, Cam and his family rested at the stylish house in the hills, bothered only once by an older couple who stopped by to check on the residents. Their cover story wasn't questioned a bit. The neighbors seemed more worried about the Griffin's children than the missing neighbors. During their stay at the house in the hills, he saw several groups of military fighter jets scream overhead, either heading out to sea or coming into the country. They were always too high for him to identify any markings or determine who the plane belonged to. With all the theft of military technology over the past 3 or 4 decades, most Chinese planes look similar to U.S. warplanes, making identification of a warplane nearly impossible to the layman. The evening of their 4th day at the house on the hill, they sat down for a dinner, a trio of candles flickering in the light breeze from the open back door. The meal consisted of chicken cooked on the barbecue, green beans sautéed in a pan with olive oil, garlic, salt and pepper, and drinks. Water for the kids, and 2 glasses of wine for the adults. Jen found the wine in a small cellar built into the garage, complete with climate and humidity controls, none of which work now. She and Cam weren't wine connoisseurs by any stretch of one's imagination, but the wine certainly didn't taste like it had been picked up at Safeway or Trader Joe's. "We need to get back on the road tomorrow," Cam suggested. "Other than the helicopter incident, I haven't seen anything to tell me we should stay put here. Plus the food is running low, and the stuff in the fridge, if it's not already bad, will spoil soon."
"I agree," Jen said. "The sooner we can get the kids off the streets and to your parents, the better."
The family ate in silence for several minutes, their appetites stifling any dinner conversation for a bit. Then Taylor spoke up.
"Did those guys in the helicopter die?"
Hunched over his plate, Cam's eyes shifted to his wife momentarily before he answered. "We don't know, Tay. We didn't go down there, so we just don't know." Stabbing a piece of chicken with his fork, Taylor was about to stuff the morsel into his mouth, but stopped.
"We should have gone down there and tried to help them."
"I would have if I didn't have you guys to look after," Cam replied, feeling a little defensive about being judged by a 12-year-old. Taylor shrugged.
"We'd have just stayed here and waited for you. No big deal."
Finished saying his piece, he bit into the hunk of chicken.
"Listen, Tay. You and your sister may see things in the not-so-distant future that aren't good. You may see me ignore some things in order to keep you 3 safe. That doesn't mean we're bad people. It just means..."
Cam shook his head, his gaze unfocused and pained.
"It just means we're doing the best we can with what we've got, that's all."
They ate quietly for a few minutes before Jen turned to him.
"Cam, it's been almost a week and we haven't seen any sort of aid coming in from outside the area. Do you think this is countrywide?"
Cam chewed thoughtfully, then swallowed. "Could be, babe. Also, we've been sequestered up here in the hills and have no idea what's going on down in the rest of the Bay Area. There could very well be ships delivering food and aid, and we just don't know about it."
"But the power? What about restoring the power?"
He turned to his wife, lips drawn tight across his teeth, his features taut under the stress of the past several days. "There probably won't be power for a long, long time."
"Then we need to get to your parents, be with family, and wait for them to put things back together."
Cam forced a smile and turned to the kids, who had finished eating and were now just eavesdropping on their parents' tense conversation. "Why don't you guys take the dishes to the kitchen and then brush your teeth?" he instructed, not wanting to scare them with what he was about to say.
"Brush our teeth? It's not bedtime yet," Layla exclaimed indignantly.
"Do it," Cam chided, his voice gentle but firm. When the clamor of feet faded up the stairs, he turned back to his wife. The people you think are going to fix all this are probably worse off than us. Some are most likely dead already. No one's coming. We'll need to figure out how to get to my parents' place and become self-sufficient as quickly as possible. Sometimes it seemed like Jen was on the fence when it came to their latest life change. One moment, she was on her A game, strong and seemingly ready to take the world by the tail, while other times, like now, she relapsed into more of a let's wait for help mindset. He needed her attitude to remain in the former from then on out and know that they would have to work as a team for the sake of the kids. The color drained from her face at his words, but she didn't argue. When she nodded and got up from the table, he didn't try to stop her. He knew she needed some time to process it all. The following morning, they loaded as much food and water as they could stuff in the packs and strapped to the 4 bicycles. It was a struggle to push the heavily laden bikes down the driveway. Finally, he hopped on and began the lazy coast downhill to the highway. Once they reached the highway, he turned his family north, racing down the on-ramps and weaving in and out of stranded cars and trucks as fast as he felt the kids could safely keep up. When the highway flattened, their speed slackened as they had to work harder to move their overloaded bicycles north along the road. The highway between Petaluma and San Francisco Bay traversed through a fairly rural area with farms and open property bordering both sides of the roadway. There were no other people on the road as they pedaled through, dodging the dead husks of semi-trucks and cars alike. Cam was thankful for the solitude, but he worried about the time when they would run across other people. Mankind was akin to most of the cats he'd met in his life, unpredictable. He was swept away in his own thoughts about his family's uncertain future as they pedaled along, the barely audible hum of their bicycle tires on the road's surface causing an almost hypnotic sensation. He worried most about where they'd stay when night came, but he also fretted about how his parents were holding up. He also felt concerned about how he would manage to safeguard everyone against hunger, thirst, and other ill-intentioned humans once they arrived at the home he'd grown up in. His father was handy with most everything related to gardening or building, but he'd never been interested in firearms. That caused Cam some worry, knowing he was heading into a gun-free zone. It wasn't that his parents embraced gun control. They just lived in a time and place where guns weren't needed for everyday living and certainly weren't part of the current culture for most people living in the Bay Area. Maybe once he arrived and everyone got settled in, he could go out and try to trade for or buy a gun. Until then, he'd have to wait and see what his parents had that would be of any value in the current times. He imagined good whiskey would be sought after, as would be guns, ammo, and food. There might be a few people who clung to the government currency, but he doubted that would last very long. A large green highway sign loomed in the distance, and Cam strained to read its message. He was pretty sure they were getting close to the exit for Sonoma and Napa, but couldn't quite make out the white lettering on the green background of the giant sign. As they drew closer, Layla cried out, "Sonoma!" That was their exit, but it had taken most of the day getting to this point, and he wasn't sure he wanted to chance trying to find a vacant house to sleep in along their mostly rural route to his parents' home. The suburban neighborhoods were full of people working in the city who probably remained marooned on the south side of the Golden Gate Bridge. Out here, farmers, vineyard owners, and horse ranchers generally worked their own properties and would therefore be in their homes. Pedaling down the off-ramp, Cam waved an arm overhead to signal his family to follow him as he turned left. On Petaluma Boulevard, he only saw apartments and industrial businesses lining the road as he slowly made his way deeper into the small town of Petaluma. Oddly, there weren't many people out, and those who were out scuttled away as if to avoid contact with the 4 strangers on bicycles. Gunshots rang out in the distance, and he was about to turn and remark to his family about the hunters already getting started on the deer population when a string of fully automatic rifle fire tore through the quiet neighborhood. He leapt from his bike and dragged it to the side of the street, dropping it and beckoning frantically for his wife and children to do the same. The gunfire intensified in the distance, and he could tell there were multiple players in the game by the slightly altered sounds, not to mention the cadence didn't fit anything close to a one-on-one fight. It sounded like 20 or 30 gunned-up dudes were going at it. The sudden and unexpected sound of real trouble frightened him. But Jen was terrified, her eyes wide, mouth pinched, as she stared at him as though waiting for him to stop the insanity in the distance.